The Genesee River Strangler. Arthur Shawcross, born on June 6, 1945, wasn't just your average milkman. This man, with his cold, dead eyes, would become a monster, the stuff of nightmares. He terrorized upstate New York, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake. He was a serial killer, plain and simple. But what drove him? What lurked beneath the surface of this seemingly ordinary man? A troubled beginning. Shawcross's childhood wasn't exactly a walk in the park. Born and raised in Watertown, New York, he carried a darkness within him from an early age. Bedwetting, arson, petty theft, you name it, he did it. Some whisper about abuse, others about neglect. Whatever the truth, something twisted inside him, planting the seeds of a monster. His schooling was no picnic either. Struggling academically, he found solace in torturing animals, a chilling foreshadowing of the horrors to come. By the time he was a teenager, Shawcross was already well acquainted with the wrong side of the law. His crimes escalated, becoming more violent, more brazen. It was like watching a runaway train, its brakes failing, hurtling towards a catastrophic end. A killer's freedom. In 1968, Shawcross found himself drafted into the Vietnam War. You'd think the horrors of war would satiate his bloodlust, but you'd be wrong. The jungle heat seemed to amplify his rage, turning him into something even more sinister. He boasted about killing 2 young Vietnamese girls, their innocent lives snuffed out. But were these just the ramblings of a troubled mind, or a terrifying glimpse into his true nature? After the war, Shawcross returned home, but the darkness followed. He landed in prison for arson, a crime that should have kept him locked away. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. In a twisted turn of events, Shawcross was released in 1975. The monster was free. In 1988, the city of Rochester, New York, became Shawcross's hunting ground. The city, known for its rich history and vibrant community, was about to be overshadowed by a series of gruesome events that would leave an indelible mark on its residents. He preyed on the vulnerable, the forgotten, their lives deemed insignificant by society. These were individuals who had already been marginalized, living on the fringes, often unnoticed and unprotected. Shawcross exploited this invisibility, turning it into a cloak for his heinous acts. Prostitutes, drug addicts, and runaways. They were easy targets, their disappearances barely registering a blip on the radar. These were people who had fallen through the cracks, their cries for help often unheard. Shawcross knew this and used it to his advantage, selecting his victims with a chilling precision. The streets of Rochester became a hunting ground, each corner and alleyway a potential scene of horror. Missing person posters began to plaster the walls, but the faces on them were often overlooked, their stories untold. The city's underbelly was a dark, dangerous place, and Shawcross thrived in it. But as the body count rose, a chilling pattern emerged. The police, initially slow to connect the dots, began to see the horrifying reality. Each victim was found strangled, their bodies dumped in or near the Genesee River. The river, once a symbol of life and movement, became a grim reminder of death. The Genesee River, winding through the heart of the city, became a silent witness to Shawcross's brutality. Bodies were pulled from its depths, each one telling a story of terror and violence. The riverbanks, once places of leisure and beauty, were now tainted with fear. The city was gripped by fear, the whispers of a serial killer on the loose sending shivers down their spines. The police were baffled, their resources stretched thin as they tried to piece together the puzzle. The community, once tight-knit and trusting, was now cloaked in suspicion and dread. Who was this monster preying on their city? The question hung heavy in the air, a constant reminder of the danger lurking in the shadows. The police released sketches, but they were vague, the details elusive. Shawcross was a phantom, always one step ahead, his identity a mystery. The pressure mounted with each passing day, the phantom-like killer always one step ahead. Detectives worked around the clock, sifting through clues, mapping out possible connections. But Shawcross remained elusive. The stress was palpable, the weight of the unsolved cases bearing down on them. The media had a field day, dubbing him the Genesee River Killer, their headlines screaming his gruesome deeds. Reporters swarmed the city, each new discovery feeding the frenzy. The sensationalism added to the fear, the name Genesee River Killer becoming synonymous with terror. But behind the sensationalism lay a terrifying reality. A cold-blooded killer was on the loose, and no one knew who he was or when he would strike again. The dark, foggy streets of Rochester became a symbol of the unknown, each shadow a potential threat. The city held its breath, waiting for the nightmare to end, but knowing deep down that the worst was yet to come. The investigation was relentless, a frantic race against time. The city was gripped with fear, and the police knew they had to act fast. Every second counted, and the pressure was mounting. The detectives worked through the night, their faces etched with determination and exhaustion. The dimly lit office was a hive of activity, with officers poring over maps, files, and photographs, trying to piece together the puzzle. The police worked tirelessly, following every lead, every hunch. They analyzed evidence with meticulous care, hoping to find that one clue that would break the case wide open. The team was united in their mission, each member playing a crucial role. They knew that the monster they were hunting was cunning and dangerous, and they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. They interviewed witnesses, scoured crime scenes, and chased down dead ends. Each interview was a potential goldmine of information, and the detectives listened intently, hoping to catch a break. The crime scenes were meticulously examined, every inch combed for evidence. The search was exhaustive, and the detectives left no stone unturned. They knew that the key to solving the case could be hidden in the smallest detail. The pressure was immense, the weight of a city's fear bearing down on them. The streets were filled with tension, and the community looked to the police for answers. The officers felt the burden of responsibility, knowing that the safety of the city rested on their shoulders. The stress was palpable, and the long hours took their toll. But they pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and a desire for justice. But amidst the chaos, a breakthrough emerged. A piece of evidence that had been overlooked suddenly took on new significance. The detectives' hearts raced as they realized they were onto something. The breakthrough was a glimmer of hope in the darkness, a sign that they were getting closer to their target. A witness came forward, placing Shawcross at the scene of one of the murders. The witness's testimony was a game-changer, providing a crucial link in the chain of evidence. The detectives took detailed notes, their minds racing with the possibilities. This was the lead they had been waiting for, and they knew they had to act quickly. Could this be the break they had been waiting for? The team gathered to discuss the new lead, their faces filled with a mix of hope and determination. They knew that this could be the turning point in the investigation, the moment when everything finally came together. The detectives felt a renewed sense of purpose, ready to follow this lead wherever it might take them. Armed with this crucial piece of information, the police zeroed in on Shawcross. They began a round-the-clock surveillance operation, watching his every move. The detectives strategized, planning their next steps with precision. They knew that they had to be careful, that one wrong move could jeopardize the entire operation. The tension was high, but the team was focused and determined. They staked out his apartment, their eyes glued to his every move. The surveillance team worked in shifts, ensuring that Shawcross was never out of sight. They documented his activities, looking for patterns and waiting for the right moment to strike. The stakeout was a test of patience and endurance, but the detectives knew that it was their best chance to catch the monster. And then, on January 3rd, 1989, they got their man. The arrest was swift and decisive, the culmination of weeks of hard work and dedication. Shawcross was handcuffed and taken into custody, his reign of terror finally brought to an end. The detectives felt a surge of relief, knowing that they had succeeded in their mission. Shawcross was apprehended near the spot where he had dumped his last victim. The location was a grim reminder of the horrors he had inflicted on the community. The detectives surveyed the scene, their minds filled with the memories of the investigation. They knew that the arrest was just the beginning, that there was still much work to be done. The relief was palpable, the nightmare finally over, but the questions lingered. The detectives celebrated their victory, but they knew that the case was far from over. They had caught the monster, but they still needed to understand him. The investigation had taken its toll, but the team was ready to continue their work, driven by a desire for justice and a need for answers. Who was Arthur Shawcross, and what drove him to commit such unspeakable acts? The detectives delved into his past, seeking to understand the mind of a killer. The community demanded answers, and the team was determined to provide them. The story of Arthur Shawcross was far from over, and the detectives knew that their work was just beginning. During his trial, Shawcross's defense team painted a picture of a man tormented by his past. They delved deep into his history, trying to evoke sympathy and understanding from the jury. They pointed to his troubled childhood, marked by abuse and neglect, and his wartime experiences in Vietnam, which left him scarred and traumatized. His history of mental illness was also brought to the forefront, with medical records and expert testimonies highlighting his psychological struggles. The defense argued passionately that Shawcross was a victim himself, driven to kill by forces beyond his control. They painted a picture of a man who was more to be pitied than condemned. They even went so far as to claim that he suffered from multiple personality disorder, suggesting that his alter ego was responsible for the heinous murders. This alter ego, they argued, was a dark and violent personality that Shawcross himself could not control, making him a puppet to his own mind's sinister machinations. The prosecution, however, saw through the charade. They were determined to show the jury the true nature of Shawcross's actions. They presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously gathered and presented, to paint Shawcross as a cold, calculating killer who took pleasure in his crimes. The prosecution's narrative was starkly different. They described Shawcross as a man who meticulously planned his murders, showing no remorse or empathy for his victims. They argued that his claims of insanity were nothing more than a desperate attempt to escape justice. The jury listened intently, weighing the evidence presented by both sides. The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, finding Shawcross guilty of 11 counts of murder. Their decision was a testament to the overwhelming evidence against him. As the verdict was read, Shawcross's expression remained stoic, but the weight of the jury's decision was palpable in the courtroom. He was sentenced to 250 years to life in prison, a sentence that ensured he would never walk free again. Shawcross would spend the rest of his days behind bars, in a high-security prison, reflecting on the crimes that led him there. The trial and its outcome served as a grim reminder of the depths of human depravity and the relentless pursuit of justice. Arthur Shawcross's reign of terror may have ended, but the scars he left on the community ran deep. The families of his victims were left to pick up the pieces, forever haunted by the loss of their loved ones. The city of Rochester, once a vibrant hub, was forever changed, the shadow of his crimes lingering in its streets. Shawcross's case also had a profound impact on the field of criminology. It raised questions about the nature of evil, the role of mental illness in criminal behavior, and the effectiveness of the criminal justice system. It also highlighted the importance of victim advocacy and the need for better resources for those affected by violent crime.